Hey guys, today we're going to be examining the Jake Paul versus Mike Tyson fight, which is tomorrow as of this video.
Jake Paul versus Mike Tyson is everything wrong with society. This is a fight that once again pushes the message that clout, money and influence is valued above everything else in our society.
It's an interesting time, isn't it? And long story short, 20 years ago or 10 years ago, this would have been a non-issue. And a fight like this would have been completely laughed out of the building. But because of the power of social media and the popularity and money it can now generate, you're now seeing a lot more gimmick matches such as this these days. And I know Mike absolutely hates it. We're calling it a gimmick match. But watching a 28-year-old take on a legend, even if he's 58, that he hasn't even deserved to get that match for, that's a gimmick match.
And while it's going to be fun to watch the fights, the fact that it's even taking place can tell us a lot about where society is headed. If you were to have told somebody 50 years ago about this situation, it would just seem laughable, absurd, and downright stupid. But now it's becoming increasingly acceptable that any influencer with enough followers can become the face of boxing, taking down older men from their former glory and using their reputation to force your brand into the public consciousness.
And again, I've got nothing against people who want to leverage social media for some kind of gain. I mean, it's just another outlet for making a living, right? I guess the only thing I have against something like this, if it's unethical, you know what I mean? And I just don't think a 28-year-old trying to make a fool out of a 58-year-old legend is ethical.
Boxing is meant to be a test of strength and durability, a display of discipline and dedication. Jake Paul and just influencer culture in general has turned this into a spectacle. And on the surface it makes sense. It's great marketing, it brings in a bunch of cash, and may actually promote boxing as a whole. And of course Jake Paul and lots of these other influencers are playing a role. Just like when he started building his brand online, Paul's had no issue making himself the supposed villain. He almost seems to revel in it, playing up the arrogant persona he spent years building and angering fans whenever he could. Now,
I mean, it's money though, isn't it? Think about it. This is no different to WWE. What you've got is Jake Paul, who's like an internet supervillain, really obnoxious, very brash, loudmouth. Everyone just wants to see him get his head punched in. He's got a very punchable face. And then what happens? Mike Tyson, who's been retired since 2005, I think, maybe a little bit earlier. So he hasn't boxed in 20 years. And by then he was already over the hill, obviously, because he didn't have a great end to his career. But anyway, I digress. And so he's like the underdog hero that's coming back and is going to try and shut him up once and for all. And it's almost like in the WWE when you've got Little Rey Mysterio taking on the Big Show. And yeah, I mean, that's the situation we have on our hands. And social media has built this up absolutely perfectly.
While most amateurs in boxing have to claw their way to the top, they spend years honing their skills before they're even given a shot at recognition, much less the big leagues. Paul, in contrast, with clout and influence, has essentially paid his way to fight in the big leagues. And if you have enough money and clout, it seems like in our society today, you can almost do anything now, no matter where it's fair, just or not. Using his money and influence, he was able to get athletes with legends behind their names to fight him. And to his audience, he was taking on the best of the best, which added weight to his declarations of being a great fighter when he won. And it annoyed boxing fans to no end.
And for the record, I don't think people give Jake Paul enough credit for the fact that he can actually box. Not obviously at a world-class standard to some of the legends of the past like Evander and Riddick Bowe and things like that. But he is a respectable heavyweight, cruiserweight, light heavyweight boxer. He can fight. The public perception is that he can't fight because he's not up in that upper echelons, but you know, it's the whole iceberg analogy. Everyone sees all the most successful people up the top, but they don't see all the journeymen below that surface level that have come before them and either failed or made perfectly acceptable careers just being mediocre boxers and fighting in the undercard on Friday and Saturday nights, you know what I mean? Jake would probably be in that echelon, at least at this point in time, but he can box. And the big question here right now really is a journeyman 28-year-old going to be able to beat a 58-year-old legend? And that's something people have to be very, very honest about because there is definitely Jake Paul derangement syndrome.
especially since most could see that almost all of his fights favored him. All of his opponents seemed to be older, retired fighters in financially difficult spots. That or they weren't even boxers. Take his fight with Ben Askren for example. In his prime, Askren was an incredible fighter, so good in fact that he represented the US at the 2008 Olympics. Jake Paul's decision to take on a former Olympic athlete was impressive, almost brave. However, this loses all meaning when you start to realize that Askren is a wrestler and not a boxer. The influencer wasn't fighting one of the best US wrestlers, he was fighting the worst striker in the UFC history. While the fights definitely weren't staged, it was apparent that Paul had taken the easy way to the top. And it's not necessarily his fault if he's able to do it and make a bunch of money from doing it, it kind of makes sense. But at the same time, the fact that this stuff is allowed and just continues to go on, taking precedence over real boxing, is showing what's really valued.
I think really people are just paying to see his fights now to probably see him get himself knocked out. I mean, I'm sure he's still got that really young crowd that probably genuinely support him. But the general public at this point just want to see him get knocked out. And I can understand from a career point of view, you don't want to pick fights where you're going to lose or look like you have egg on your face. But reputation is everything. And Jake Paul probably would have been more respected if he picked some really hard fights and lost, rather than pick these I guess you could almost say rigged matches, where people are going to be like not taking him seriously. And that's what we have right now.
It isn't just the dedication skill, rising to the top from nothing. What the sport really seems to be valuing today is clout, money, and superficial flashiness. This is why boxing elites and many others question the legitimacy of his career. Many suspected the influencer wouldn't stand a chance against a professional boxer, and the same could be said for KSI and all these other influencers. So spurred on by the fact that no one trusted in his ability, and the fact that Jake is a relatively good boxer, he challenged Tommy Fury. Fury is the only pro boxer Paul has actually dared to fight, and it's obvious why. Having grown used to the slower pace of former opponents, Paul wasn't ready for Fury's rapid-fire hits, and unsurprisingly Fury won, and those who doubted the influencer's skills felt justified. Now most people could ignore Jake again. For the average person, he slipped back into oblivion. As a result, his next few fights were bittersweet wins, but they just weren't landing the same, and the now 27-year-old wasn't really having it. He needed a fight that would grab people's attention, something that would anger them so much that they couldn't help but pay attention to him. A boxing fight that should never happen. A fight that's completely about just clout, money, and nothing else.
I think this whole fight benefits Jake Paul for the record. A lot of people think that 2-minute rounds are going to benefit Tyson, but that's not the case, and I'm going to explain why. First of all, it's 8 2-minute rounds, right? And it's going to benefit Jake because being a 16-minute fight and having such a small round in between breaks, he's going to be able to come out guns blazing. Now, that really worries me when you have the speed of a 28-year-old, even if he's a journeyman, going up against a 58-year-old. Mike Tyson ain't going to be able to match that. And then second of all, the bigger gloves, right? And so obviously Mike Tyson's going to have to hit pretty hard if he's going to get one good shot in. Just in my personal opinion, and I could be wrong looking in, everything about this benefits Jake and not Mike at all. But the last thing a boxer loses is his punch, right? And so if Mike gets one of his trademark uppercuts in on the inside, I still think Jake could be in big trouble.
He needed to challenge one of the most iconic fighters in the world. A fighter who was once so dangerous, Jake's life would have been in danger had he fought him in his prime. Mike Tyson. There's one thing that you can't deny about Jake Paul. He's confident. Few people can challenge Iron Mike to a fight and come out the other side unscathed, even at his age. Many who faced the boxer in the ring got their backsides handed to them. One even lost part of his hip. So when Jake issued his challenge, fans' responses ranged from outrage to excitement. But the real elephant in the room here is that Tyson is obviously 3 decades older than the influencer. He made a name for himself in the boxing world before Paul was even born. The only reason he stopped was because he couldn't do it anymore. During his time in the ring, Tyson fought in 58 matches and won 50 of them, and most of these were knockouts, his most iconic being against Michael Spinks in 1988. In just over 91 seconds, he knocked Spinks out. The fight is now famed as the 6th shortest heavyweight title fight in history, and even though he's nearing 60, which seems to level out the playing field, he should really never be fighting Jake Paul in the first place. Now, for a man pushing 60, Tyson is in incredible shape.
You know what, and with this fight, I think from a reputation standpoint, Michael's got everything to gain and nothing to lose, to be honest. I don't think from a reputation point of view this benefits Jake at all. Because if Mike Tyson wins, he's going to be the hero that shut up the younger big mouth. And if he loses, he's going to look like a hero and so brave for coming out of retirement to give everyone one last match to begin with. Where on Jake Paul, on the other hand, if he wins, he's going to look like a bully for beating up an old man. And if he loses, he's going to look like a punk or losing to an old man. So, from a reputation standpoint, Michael has nothing to lose. And I really think this is going to make him extra dangerous, to be honest.
Leading up to his fight with Paul, he hit his sparring partner so hard that he had to be sent to hospital. Not only that, but Gene Kilroy, a longtime friend of Muhammad Ali, was shocked at how far he'd come despite his age.
This is the strongest I've ever seen you.
Yeah?
Yeah, the strongest I've ever. And I know you
age,
since you're 13. I think this is so. This
You might not have the speed, you have the power.
Nothing impresses me.
As fit as he may be, that doesn't erase the fact that Tyson is old and is currently dealing with the consequences of his tumultuous past. He was even forced to postpone his initial fight with Jay due to health complications, and he's dealing with more than just ulcer flare-ups that need immediate medical attention. As in 2022, Tyson had to use a walking stick in a wheelchair due to nerve issues that affected his legs. Health issues aside, he also hasn't fought professionally in over 20 years. Which is why many people are worried that this bout with Jake might actually be too much for him.
Yeah, I mean, there certainly will be some ring rust, right? I mean, just everything about being in the big squared circle, the crowds, the lights, and the whole atmosphere. Jake has done all that and more, a lot more recently and a lot more many times, I guess you could say, over the last couple decades. Well, I mean, Mike hasn't done it at all. That is actually going to be a disadvantage, just having that in-the-moment ring awareness and everything. I think Mike will be fine. Again, I just really think the only issue here, honestly, is the whole father time situation. So Mike's going to have to rely on his power. If it's going to go the distance, there's no way that Mike's going to be able to match Jake's speed. And again, the way things are set up with the gloves and everything, Mike's at a massive disadvantage. So again, he has nothing to lose, and he has the most respect to gain from the fans from this, I think.
Promoters like Eddie Hearn have been particularly outspoken about the ordeal. His biggest concerns are the danger Tyson will be putting himself in and the lack of respect for the integrity of the sport.
Because I think it's just disrespectful to the sport, but I don't want to see it. I don't want to watch my all-time favourite fighters, one of my heroes, I guess, in a boxing ring at 55 years of age, a shell of what he once was.
He made it clear that if Tyson got seriously hurt in the ring, it was on the people who allowed this match to even happen. And Jake has actually also shown concern for the older fighter's health as well.
Well, a man's got to do what a man's got to do, right? And I think obviously he should have the best medical professionals and not these paid-off dodgy ones checking over him, making sure they're looking over all his vitals and his statistics and things like that. Obviously, I'm no doctor and I'm not great at articulating this. As long as he's looked over by the right people and they say, hey, you know what, you're all good to go, I don't have a problem with it. What I do have a problem with is a 28-year-old bully fighting someone that's so much older than him. That's it, really. I'm not really too worried about Mike's safety, providing he's had all the health checks, genuine health checks, and he's good to go. But let me know your
Tyson's
thoughts.
ulcer flare-up in May, he assured people his primary concern was the boxer's health. However, he's also not giving Tyson much choice in the matter. Now, of course, Paul seems to be running on pure ego in the build-up to this fight. If you listen to any of his interviews, it's evident that he's on an unearned power trip. Sure, he's spoken about how honored he is that Tyson agreed to fight him.
It is an honor to step in there with one of the three biggest legends in the history of the sport.
But he's also regularly declared that he's fighting Tyson and no one else. It puts the boxer in an awkward position.
Again, at the end of the day, it's all about money. And you can say, Jake, it's for this reason or it's for that reason and it's an honor and all that. Look, man, it's about the almighty dollar, and that is fine. If you're honest about that, you probably would have even gotten a little bit more respect about it. Now, take this with a little bit of a pinch of salt, okay? Because I saw this in an article and I don't know if it's fact, so please correct me in the YouTube chat if it isn't. But apparently, Mike Tyson's got a guarantee of $20 million for this fight, and Jake Paul's got a guarantee of $40 million. I take a big exception to that. In what universe is one of the biggest legends, like we're talking top 10 legends in boxing history, or at least heavyweight boxing history, earning half of what the social media superstars getting? I just feel like that's all sorts of wrong. And the honest thing is as well, is everyone's paying, I think, to see Tyson come out of retirement and knock Jake Paul's head off. They're not paying all that money because it's Jake Paul. They're paying all that money because they want to see their hero.
Either he doesn't fight the influencer, ending his boxing career once and for all, which most would welcome, or he risks a dangerous fight that could leave him hurt and ruin the reputation of boxing as a whole. Jake is also constantly talking himself up, something that's unsurprising for clout-hungry influencers. But he seems particularly overconfident. It's almost like he's compensating for something. The what for revealed itself in an interview at the end of last month. While talking with the Today Show Australia, Paul insisted he is a killer, and that he was born to be world champion, not an easy task for a non-professional boxer.
You know what? The only time Jake Paul kills anybody is when they have to listen to him talk, seriously.
But nonetheless, he's determined to be so.
People just think I'm this nice, crazy, smiley social media content
I don't think
creator.
any of that.
I like to have fun. You know,
You're
I've
an
always
idiot.
been the class clown, but I'm a killer. This is what I was bred to do. This is my destiny.
However, he sounds less like a man sure of his abilities and more like someone trying to get people to take him seriously. And perhaps he cares more about what people think than he's letting on. And unfortunately for him, everyone but his YouTube audience seems to be on Tyson's side. Even fighters like Quinton Jackson and Conor McGregor want Tyson to shut that kid up and rattle him. But this fight between Jake Paul and Mike Tyson is more than just an embarrassment for the boxing world.
You know, and I can understand why so many of Mike Tyson's colleagues and other fighters in all sorts of categories and leagues would want to see Jake Paul lose. Because this is what they were literally born to do. You know, they've come from hardship and they've trained, you know, obviously the whole cliche, blood, sweat and tears their whole lives to be in the top of their field doing what they do. You know, a lot of fighters come from underprivileged backgrounds and they do these kind of sports sometimes because they've got no other choice, you know what I mean? And so when they've finally bled, gone through the hard times and they've made it and they've perfected their craft, to hear this snotty-nosed little kid come by with a social media following, acting like he's a big shot and he deserves all these opportunities, nuh-uh. I'm not surprised that every single professional fighter wants to see his head get kicked in, or punched in, I should say.
It will become a demonstration of how society rewards and often values showmanship over hard work. These kinds of novelty bouts are nearly always disappointing and they're always forgotten shortly afterwards. Everyone remembers George Foreman's fight against Ali, or the time he took back the belt a stunning 2 decades later, but barely anyone remembers the time he fought 5 men in one night. It just doesn't really have the same place in history, as it comes across just so absurd. And even that fight was still a great display of strength and boxing prowess. But these influencer fights are a bit different to the classic exhibition matches we used to see. At first, they just fought between each other. It was completely opaque with what they were doing with the
Take
first
the
Logan
headgear
v
off.
KSI fight.
Take the headgear
Both of the
off.
influencers got to advertise themselves in front of a whole new audience. It was also a great way of perpetuating and monetizing their manufactured feuds. Years after their fights, Logan and KSI are now in business selling moldy lunchable knockoffs, making it seem like they were always friends and business partners. Before, these fights were clearly just about the money and you could easily ignore them to focus on real boxing matches. But now these fights are starting to poison the rest of boxing, and if they continue to bring in massive crowds, they could easily become the norm.
So I guess that's the point, isn't it? I don't mind a novelty match every now and then, as long as it's not the norm. You know, all the heroes, like I said, that have spent their whole lives in the sport, trained, worked their way up the rankings, show a little showmanship, build their brands and everything, 100% exclusively to that sport. I would love to see them get in the limelight and all the opportunity, you know what I mean? Obviously, social media leverage is a part of today's day and age, no matter what you do. That's just a reality. So you have to be good at your craft and you have to be good at social media. But the social media should be the secondary to the art, not before the art, if that makes sense. Obviously, as it is in Jake Paul's case.
This is one of the first of these big fights that actually isn't an exhibition match. It's going on both of their records. So if Jake Paul does end up victorious, it would be a fitting analogy for the state of boxing right now. New money triumphing over an old, tired ex-champion. It's made even more tragic by the fact that Tyson is one of those rare modern celebrities whose fame is directly a result of his own grit and talent. And you can't really blame him for cashing in on his past achievements, as Tyson will earn a reported $20 million from the fight.
Right.
But staggeringly, that's only half of what Jake Paul will make.
So yeah, I mentioned that earlier in the video, so I wasn't sure if I had the facts or if it was a bogus article. So that was for real, huh? So yeah, like I said before, I'm not going to harp on it too much again, but Jake Paul is getting a guarantee of over double of what Tyson's getting. That is a problem.
Still doesn't seem right. It's often a sad story when ex-boxers go back into the ring against far younger men if they lose badly. Another reason influencers have latched onto boxing is that it gives them a feeling of legitimacy. Jake Paul wants to make it as a boxer, or at least he says that he does, because it would be a real achievement. He never will, of course, and his ego-tripping takes up space and attention which is directly needed by the rest of the boxing world. There are obviously far more skilled boxers in the world, people who have dedicated years to climbing up the ranks, and many will never even get a taste of the viewership drawn to the Jake Paul-Mike Tyson fight.
Well, as I said, you do have to work on your social media presence, your media presence. I mean, look, you're going to see undercards all the time for belts changing hands off people that people haven't even heard of. You know, unfortunately, that element of charisma is very important in combat sports. It just is what it is. With that being said, you know, the guys that put on good fights and are proven to be reliable should be getting more opportunities over gimmick matches like this.
And it's kind of infuriating that an influencer who's been in the game for a few years can earn more from showing up to a fight than a pro can ever win from winning one, especially for long-time boxing fans. Even more infuriating is how little new audiences actually care about the sport. While influencers are introducing an entire generation to boxing, there's little to no interest in pro matches anymore, as the only thing that's actually promoted by the boxing networks is drama between influencers and how quickly they can take each other out. And this is all because influencer fights are just a lot more flashier. They're essentially WWE without the professionals or safety measures. It's no wonder that Logan Paul's new move is to literally work for the WWE. And the fact that this is just boxing now is warping the young generation's sense of value and success.
Does anyone else see Jake Paul eventually going to WWE and tag him with his brother? I think everyone can see this happening a mile away. I guess the question is, how many more fights has Jake Paul got within him? Honestly, I'm hoping this Tyson fight will be his last one and he'll get knocked the F out and he'll walk away with a tail between his legs. I'm curious to hear your thoughts, guys.
Seems like these days your success is often measured just by how many followers you have. It doesn't even matter if you're skilled at your craft. If you aren't earning vast amounts of money from it, you just aren't successful. Or rather, that's the mindset of a lot of the younger generation, as learned from following people like Jake Paul and other influencers. Now, he may inspire someone to follow in his footsteps, but what happens when they don't succeed as fast as he did? They may get frustrated to the point they resent the sport and eventually drop it. While the situation is hypothetical, it is still very likely. But even more worrying is the fact that to make it as a boxer, or anything really in life anymore, it's more about your clout and appearance rather than the substance behind it.
Well, like Tyson even said, and like I brought up earlier in the video, a lot of people get into fighting and combat sports because they don't have any other choice. If you're coming from a lower middle class upbringing, and you have all these other opportunities like good education and every other opportunity and privilege that the world can provide you for being in that bracket, so to speak, then you're probably not going to need to box. You're probably not going to need to do MMA. Look, there are exception of private school kids that are really, really good combat sports athletes, but it isn't the normal. You know, at the end of the day, most combat athletes come from the wrong side of the track. So, you know, if you have kids that are like snotty-nosed, like influencer wannabes, and they take up a combat sport and they give it up, they either just had other opportunities that were readily available to them, or they just didn't want it bad enough. It's as simple as that. So I think the right people are going to still go into boxing, and if anyone's going to give it up because they didn't succeed straight away, I truly believe they shouldn't have been in that sport in the first place.
Valuing flashiness over professionalism is extending far beyond just boxing. And even more worryingly is that we're starting to see this in the political sphere, as people have completely forgotten today that they shouldn't really rely on their favorite celebrities for political guidance, nor celebrities to run for president, as their expertise is flashiness and entertainment, not what's best for an entire country's governance. But as younger generations are pushed more and more towards distrusting their government that has abandoned them, they rely on stars to make their critical decisions. So many people trust celebrity agendas more than even politicians. They'll trust Hollywood stars virtue signaling or billionaires trying to be relatable more than actual professionals in the field.
I feel like this is going off the topic a little bit. I don't think Moon has a political agenda, but it is getting a little bit political here. I will say this. You're obviously going to have legacy media giving you information. You're going to have influencers giving you information. I mean, obviously, you've just got to go to as many sources as you can, a little piece of here, and then just form your own conclusion with due diligence, right? You can't just go to one or another and expect it to be gospel.
Just like the boxing fights that we're starting to see, hatred and division is the best thing to make money. It's the best thing that gets views, and it's the best things to profit from these views. Just like in politics, the stronger and more dividing your opinions, the more fame and attention you seem to get, and thus the more power. Which is leading to a world where we value superficial facades and increasing division and disunity over everything else. An entire society continually arguing over who's going to win in a fight and who looks the best. Now, in regards to this fight, the fight will be huge. It'll probably go down as one of the biggest events in the sport's history, but not because of the skill involved. It's all just because of outrage clicks. People wanting to see Jay get punched in the face by Mike, and laughing at his weak
That's why everyone's watching.
all for a giant profit from the flashiness, no substance fight that's changing boxing for the absolute worst. No matter.
By the way, I got $100 on this fight, and I very rarely gamble, if at all. And I am betting on Mike Tyson to win by knockout. And the reason I'm doing this is quite frankly just to make the fight more exciting, and I am genuinely supporting him. So by all means, if I end up making a fool of myself, you can let me know in the comments, and you can celebrate with me in the chat if I win. There you go, that's just something a little bit extra at the end of this video.
No matter what happens in this fight, Jake Paul won't emerge as a hero, and he knows that. It's just part of the persona. If he actually does beat Mike Tyson, he might become the face of boxing for a little bit. But he's also the guy who beat up an old man for that title to get more views and clout. On the other hand, if Tyson wins, Jake Paul will be the laughing stock of the sport.
Exactly.
But as much as people will continue to shame him,
Like
he doesn't
got
care what
nothing to
people
lose.
think. And it's easy to see why. At the end of the day, he will make a bunch of money from this and become more famous for it. And you can't.
You know, and that's the thing, like, I know Jake's going to be okay no matter what because he's got a ton of money. He's got more money than he needs. Like, he's going to be fine as long as he's sensible for the rest of his life. But you can't take that where we're going in another 40, 50, 60 years, depending on your age. Wouldn't you want to have your reputation and legacy to be something positive? I mean, look, I guess the reality is, in like 100 years, the vast majority of us are going to be forgotten anyway, so I suppose it doesn't matter. And look, you know, I hope going forward in the future for Jake, he'll think more of the community as well. He's still young at the end of the day. I don't think there's all hope lost for him, but yeah, right now he's certainly douchey.
Can't really blame him for that. It's more the fact that he's rewarded for doing so in the first place. And this is just one of the most frustrating things about this entire situation. While you might not want to support the fight, there is one big silver lining to it all that we haven't discussed: the undercard. Lots of these
pretty
fights are
strong, to be
entirely
honest.
deserving of their own spot in the limelight.
See,
Like
title
Taylor
matches.
vs Serrano too. Their first fight was a sight to behold. It was a war, going to the full 10 rounds and
Oh, I
ending in
saw
a
that
controversial
fight.
split decision. Now the long-awaited
Yeah, I
rematch,
remember that
which was
one.
put on hold when the Tyson Paul fight got delayed in July, is finally happening. It's the decider between two world champions at the top of their class. This is the fight to watch on the night, not the novelty match.
I wonder how much they're
afterwards.
gonna get
Then
paid.
there's the showdown in the men's WBC welterweight bout between Barrios and Ramos. And while Barrios is the clear favorite in the rankings and record, there's still a lot of potential for an upset. They're both dangerous fights, and while lots of their previous fights with other opponents have gone the distance, a fiery finish isn't completely off the table. Obviously, there's been far less publicity for these fights, and it's a shame they're on the undercard at all. But the hunger and drive that these real athletes have far outweighs all of that. At the end of the day, this is what should be getting people's attention. So if you already have a Netflix subscription, these are the fights worth tuning into. And if you've
Well, you know, it's also going to come down to the WBA, WBC, IBF, and whatever other organizations to promote, showcase, and spend some money marketing their fighters, right? I think one of the fascinating things about today's social media is if you've got someone that's got access immediately to millions and millions of people like Jake Paul, then companies, for example, don't even need to spend any money, or at least not as much money, I should say, on their marketing budget, because the social media megastars are pretty much doing it all in-house for a fraction of the price. It's pretty incredible. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. I hope you found that video interesting. Let me know your thoughts, and enjoy the fight. We'll see you on the next one.